don't remember when this feeling started. On the outside, everything seems in place, just like it should be. But somewhere inside, there's a quiet sense that something is missing. I've tried to keep everything in order. The finances, the schedule, even how I respond to things. Still, there's this quiet question that keeps returning. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still, almost like it was holding its breath. It should have felt peaceful, but my thoughts didn't follow. I looked at everything I'd already finished. The list was full, and the day had barely begun. Yet there was still a voice telling me it wasn't enough. And maybe this isn't about something missing. Maybe it's something I've misunderstood all along. Something quiet, but present every single day. My name is Clara. I'm a mother who tries every single day to take care of everything at home. And honestly, I've always believed that was enough. That morning felt like any other. I prepared breakfast while my child sat at the table, quietly playing with a spoon. Small moments like this used to make me feel enough. My husband got ready for work as I made sure everything was in place. Nothing felt rushed, just the usual flow of our mornings. It all seemed steady and familiar. When the house became quiet again, I sat down alone. I opened my expense notes, carefully written over time. Seeing everything organized gave me a brief sense of relief. I've been more careful lately. I write down almost every expense and think twice before buying anything. It feels like I've made progress, even if only a little. But the feeling didn't last very long. There was always something that felt slightly off, like I was still missing something important. I tried to ignore it. Maybe I was just tired or thinking too much. I told myself it wasn't something I needed to worry about. But the quieter everything became, the clearer the feeling was. That everything I've been doing still didn't feel complete. And it left me quietly questioning myself. I started noticing my days more closely. Everything I did felt like a checklist waiting to be completed. It moved forward, but I didn't always feel present in it. I cooked, cleaned, and kept track of expenses. Everything was in order, just as it should be. Yet nothing seemed to stay long enough to feel satisfying. Sometimes I watched other mothers from a distance. They seemed calmer, more put together in ways I couldn't quite explain. I quietly wondered what I was missing. I never said it out loud, but quietly I started comparing, and without realizing it, it slowly drained my energy. Every time I saw something better, I felt the need to do more, as if what I had already done wasn't enough. The bar kept moving quietly. I added more targets to my day. I tried harder without questioning it. The pressure grew quietly in the background. Strangely, the more I pushed myself, the further behind I felt. It was like running without ever arriving. The effort never seemed to land anywhere. That was when I paused long enough to notice. Maybe the weight wasn't from the work itself. Maybe it came from the standards I kept holding on to. The house feels unusually quiet that afternoon. I sit in the living room, not really doing anything. For a moment, I notice how still everything is. I open my notes again, reading through what I planned. Everything looks organized and under control. On paper, nothing seems out of place. Still, something doesn't quite match inside me. There's a quiet feeling of being left behind. Even though I know I've been trying, I stare out the window without a clear thought. The light feels gentle, almost comforting, but my mind doesn't feel as light. I begin to question myself quietly. Maybe I'm not disciplined enough, or maybe I'm just not as capable as I thought. These thoughts don't come all at once. They build slowly, almost unnoticed, until they start to feel like quiet pressure. The hardest part is not knowing where it comes from. It doesn't announce itself. It just stays quietly every day. So I pause for a moment. I don't try to fix anything this time. I just sit with it and try to understand. I started asking myself something I had avoided for a long time. What does enough really mean for me? The question felt unfamiliar, but honest. I realized I had never truly defined it for myself. I had been moving without a clear measure, just following what seemed right at the time. Slowly, I noticed how much I had absorbed from the outside. Expectations I never questioned became part of me. They felt natural, even when they weren't. That was where the feeling came from. Not because I lacked anything, but because I was measuring myself with something that wasn't mine. When I saw that clearly, something softened inside me. It wasn't dramatic, just a quiet sense of relief, like finding something that had always been there. Maybe effort was never the problem. Maybe I had just been heading in the wrong direction, judging myself through the wrong lens. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had failed. I just saw things differently, and that felt enough for now. I understood something simple that stayed with me. This was not about doing more. It was about knowing what truly feels enough. I closed the notebook slowly, not out of defeat, but out of curiosity. Something in me wanted to pause instead of push. I wondered if I had been looking at everything the wrong way. I reached for a blank page and began again. This time I didn't write what I should do. I wrote what I truly needed. I listed the simple things that mattered. Warm meals, time together, a peaceful home, not the things that only looked good from the outside. I stopped adding things just to feel accomplished. Not everything needed to be perfect. Not everything needed to be full. I chose to be done for the day. Not because I had no more energy, but because I wanted to feel enough. I walked back into the kitchen and nothing had changed. But somehow, everything felt lighter. It no longer felt like a burden. My child called me from the other room. I answered without rushing this time. There was no urgency, only presence. In that quiet moment, something shifted inside me. Nothing around me had changed, but I knew I had. I began to notice something small but steady. The feeling of enough didn't come from finishing everything. It came from deciding to stop for a moment. I realized I had been chasing something unclear. There was no real shape to what I called enough, and that made everything feel heavier than it should be. I kept thinking I needed to do more. Add more effort, more tasks, more control. But what I really needed was to pause and look again. Some pressure I carried wasn't even mine. It came from things I never questioned. And I started letting those go quietly. I started to accept my own pace. It didn't need to match anyone else's, and it didn't have to look perfect. Strangely, when I stopped chasing too much, things felt lighter. There was space again in my thoughts, and I could finally breathe without rushing. Nothing around me changed drastically. The house was still the same, the routines stayed, but the way I saw it felt different. I'm beginning to trust this feeling, that enough is something simple, as long as I stay honest with myself. Maybe I've been too hard on myself, not loudly but quietly in the background, in ways I barely noticed. I keep measuring myself against something unclear, standards that don't really belong to me. Still, I expect to feel enough. This feeling of not being enough doesn't always mean I lack something. Sometimes I'm just using the wrong measure, and that happens. Maybe I can pause for a moment. Not everything needs to move forward right now. Some things can wait. I can choose what truly matters today, and let go of what doesn't. That choice feels lighter. Being a mother isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's about being present, and being here is enough for today. And maybe this is already more than I thought, more than I usually acknowledge, more than I give myself credit for. Because enough isn't about how much I do. It's about how I accept where I am, and finding peace in that. That day, I didn't finish everything on my list. A few things stayed undone, quietly waiting. But for the first time, I let them be without questioning myself. I sat next to my child without looking at the time. We didn't do anything important, just shared a quiet moment. Somehow, it felt like enough. Maybe life doesn't always need to feel full. Not every moment has to be used to its limit. Sometimes, leaving space is what makes it meaningful. If you've ever felt this way too, maybe you're not falling behind. Maybe nothing is missing. You might just need to see it differently. And if this story feels close to you, you don't have to rush away. You can stay here a little longer. We can learn this slowly, together.